Mayor Allen, you may start the meeting when you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, call the meeting to order. Due to COVID-19, council's taking necessary steps to limit in-person meetings. As such, members of council are participating along with staff in the meeting electronically. The meeting is being live streamed. Residents can watch the meeting live online at www.springwater.ca/live. You can listen from a telephone during the meeting by calling 647-558-0588 and using the ID 869-9014-4136 with the pound sign. This is available during the meeting, and if you are not able to do either of those and want to see it, you can follow it on the township's YouTube channel, accessible through the website. We have a special meeting tonight. Can I have a mover and seconder to open the meeting, please? Councillor Ma and Councillor Cabral, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of May 31, 2021 come to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, Council? All right, so we will move to 3.1 in the agenda, call to order. Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Cabral, Councillor Ritchie, that this public meeting of council held under section 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 P13 as amended for the zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2021-007 by Bradley Adams, and for the official plan amendment application and zoning bylaw amendments application 0P 2021-002, 2021-005 regarding cannabis production facilities be called to order at 6:33 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, we're at 3.2, which is ZB 2021-007 Adams, re 1238 Vesper Valley Road. But first, I'll welcome you to the public meeting of Springwater Township Council held in compliance with section 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act, to give the public the opportunity to express their views in regard to the proposed amendments of the Township of Springwater official plan and zoning bylaw as amended. The first part of the meeting is to present the amendments. Following that, the public will be given the opportunity to make oral submissions through the Zoom application. Any person wishing to make an oral application must have notified the township prior to 8:30 a.m. this morning and must have been added to the commenters list. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect of a proposed official plan and or zoning bylaw amendment does not make an oral submission at the public meeting, or written submissions to the Township of Springwater before the proposed official plan amendment is adopted and zoning bylaw amendments are passed, the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. All comments or questions should be addressed through the chair, myself. Oral submissions will be included in this meeting minutes and form part of the public record, including the name and address of the speaker, as information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes of the meetings will be posted on the township's website. So the first item is ZB 2021-007 by Bradley Adams of 1238 Vesper Valley Road. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates on which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 11th day of May 2021 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 10 properties in the township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was also posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Vesper Valley Road. The notice was also placed on the township's website.
Thank you. Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
Correspondence was received from Nation Huron-Wendat in an email dated May 26, 2021, and those comments can be seen as attached on the agenda.
Thank you. I'll now call on Deborah Ann Lisk, planner, to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of the proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully. Okay. And can you see my PowerPoint slides? Sorry? Yep. Okay, perfect. So zoning bylaw amendment
Yes.
2021-007 is a zoning bylaw amendment for the property known as 1238 Vesper Valley Road. Current zoning is agricultural, and it is designated agricultural in the township plan. The purpose of this application is to rezone the retained farmland portion from a farm surplus dwelling severance to the agricultural consolidation zone, which would prohibit any residential uses on that retained farmland. This zoning bylaw amendment was a condition of a committee of adjustment decision on an application for that consent, which was B0721, which related to that farm surplus dwelling severance. The next slide here just shows the zoning schedule, which will outline the land that is retained, as well as the farm surplus dwelling severance, which is on the corner there. The zoning bylaw amendment would only be applied to the farmland to prohibit any residential uses. The current zoning on the residential property would remain as agricultural, where the existing dwelling is. That concludes all of my comments for this application. I'm happy to answer any questions. There is no recommendation report on tonight's agenda. That will follow on the next council agenda.
Thank you. I'll now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who've registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. There are no commenters registered to make an oral submission in regards to this application.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of council have any questions or comments at this point regarding this application? Okay, seeing none, I thank all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for showing an interest in this matter. Thank you. Next, we move on to OP 2021-002 and ZB 2021-005 cannabis production facilities. I'll now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates on which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was posted in the newspaper on April 29th, 2021, with reminders on May 13th and May 27th, and sent to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. The notice was also placed on the township's website.
And has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of the public meeting?
Correspondence has been received from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in an email dated May 19th, 2021, from Nation Huron-Wendat in an email dated May 26, 2021, from the Township of Springwater Agricultural Advisory Committee in a letter dated May 27th, 2021. From Tom Nolert, Springwater resident, by letter dated May 27th, 2021. From Anthony and Regina Seychelles, Springwater residents, by letter dated May 28th, 2021. Peter and Sue Johnson, residents, in an email dated May 31st, 2021. Brian and Linda Schultz, residents, in a letter dated May 31st, 2021. Jason McKeag, resident, in an email dated May 31st, 2021, and all correspondence can be seen on the agenda. Additional comments were received from John and Roberta Beecroft, Springwater residents, in an email dated May 31st, 2021, and those comments will be integrated into any future staff reports.
Thank you. I'll now call upon Chris Russell, planner, to give a presentation outlining the purpose and effect of the proposal.
Thank you, Marilyn. I will now share my screen. Okay, thank you, Marilyn. On March 17th, 2021, Council directed that staff initiate an amendment process to the Township's policy documents related to cannabis production facilities prior to the cessation of interim control bylaw number 2020-041 on June 3rd, 2021. Staff have prepared preliminary draft policy amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw for discussion purposes at tonight's public meeting. And these documents have been drafted in line with the key recommendations of the Cannabis Production Review Study prepared by WSP Group earlier this year. In addition to holding this public meeting tonight, the proposed amendments have also been circulated to our external agency partners for review and comment, as well as posted on the Township's website. Staff have also provided workshop presentations to Council and the Agricultural Advisory Committee for additional comment on the proposed amendments. Very simply, the amendments will be applicable to the entire geographic area of the Township of Springwater and will update the official plan and zoning bylaw in line with the recommendations of the WSP study. The effect of the proposed amendments will be to permit the use of agricultural and industrial lands for the cultivation and processing of cannabis. And at this point, I'll provide a brief summary of the proposed amendments, but will not cover each document exhaustively as these materials have been posted already. The proposed amendments will seek to implement a new definition of a cannabis production facility within both the official plan and zoning bylaw. The amendments would permit indoor and outdoor cultivation of cannabis within the agricultural A zone and indoor-only cannabis cultivation within the industrial zone. Processing of cannabis would be permitted in either zone, provided it takes place within a building. The amendments also set forth criteria and provisions, including but not limited to new purpose-built facilities versus retrofits, buffering and screening, on-site water storage and waste management plans, prohibitions on outdoor storage and advertising signage, parking and loading spaces, requirements for site plan control, and as a mitigative measure for abutting residential and or sensitive uses, a special crop setback for outdoor cultivation within the agricultural A zone of 150 meters. Once all public, agency, and council input and feedback is gathered, staff will be reporting back to council with finalized amendments and a recommendation report for consideration. In the meantime, and given the township's interim control bylaw will lapse on June 3rd, 2021, staff will be bringing forward a recommendation report to council on June 2nd to extend the interim control bylaw moratorium for a period of an additional 6 months to allow council time to implement the new policies. Thank you very much, and staff are happy to answer any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you, Planner Russell. So for clarification for those who are watching this, the comments that were submitted, letters, comments, Clerk Ainsworth, are available to be seen on the agenda, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding these applications.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. There is one commenter registered to make an oral submission in regards to these applications, Jean-Yves Urbain, and I will allow to talk.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I'm surprised I cannot even see you be on video discarding that. My name is Jean-Yves Urbain. I'm a professional engineer with 40 years experience.
Mr. Urbain, can I just interrupt for a sec? If you go to the upper right-hand corner, you see the 3 dots?
Okay, not.
If you click that, there you go.
There we
There.
go.
Okay.
So I restart. My name is Jean-Yves Urbain. I'm a professional engineer with over 40 years experience with order quality, order management, dispersion calculation, and even being involved with the normal farm practice protection board. There is an issue currently in Petrolia with another cannabis facility. I'm an expert witness for that case. And I prepared a submittal, excuse me, that I'm a little bit late. You're going to receive tomorrow morning. It's pretty comprehensive. I have reviewed the WSP document, and I have a few issues with it. One of them is, it's kind of the fact is that nothing has been prepared in January or submitted in January. It's already old in the sense that other municipality has already went forward with some bylaw to try to protect against cannabis, but also mostly Health Canada has issued a draft guideline. I don't know if you people have reviewed it. I had did a major review of that document submitted, and I will send you a copy of what I have submitted. That will help you to manage. Even the guidelines are just a guideline. It's just not law, it's not regulation. It's the issue is just enforcement. And that's really my issue that I have with it in the sense that enforcement, my comments on Health Canada to say how you're going to enforce. Best practice, WSP has looked at Canada, Ontario. It is very new to do, to grow cannabis. It's just a few years. We have to look at other jurisdictions, and mostly the US, who are doing that type of work for over 10 years. I am sending you, as part of the document, some of the review I did from the US that will also give you better feeling about how to control the regulation-wise and things like that. But the bottom line in the US is you have to grow cannabis within a greenhouse, have to be enclosed properly, emission have to be through a scrubber, not a scrubber within the recirculation within the air, within the building, but through a scrubber to activate the carbon, and no smell of the property line. And that's the major issue. Land use versus crop. Minister of of Agriculture says it's a crop. However, the PPS defined that agricultural land is to be used for food and fiber. Cannabis is did not meet that requirement. It's not food. It is not a fiber. It is a controlled substance. So this means that you can control it by your land use. You're allowed to say, I don't want it in that location. I don't want it in agricultural land. I want it in industrial land. Or I want agricultural land, but you have to meet those following criteria. Again, in the document you're going to receive tomorrow morning is going to be also highlighting that part. Land value. And that's something that WSP, excuse me, did not raise. I have two houses. I have one in downtown Toronto, but I also have a farm in Tottenham, a 100 acres farm. I have a neighbor who is a cannabis producer. Property value will go down if people lose enjoyment of their land. If I want to sell my land, I'm going to be obliged to say to the new owner, oh, by the way, there is a cannabis facility on the other side of the street. The agent who will represent me will also have to do exactly the same. What do you think will happen to my value of my property? What do you think will happen also to the tax base that that pay for the service you're offering. The tax base within a kilometer and a half away from that facility will go down. And there is precedent. There is a house in, that's the one I'm involved in, Petrolia. Their valuation of the house has been reduced by 65%. It's just dollar and cents that will impact your citizen, and they are not going to be happy. And also they're going to lose enjoyment of their land. No question about it. And you're going to receive your share of phone calls from your citizens. Try to manage odors, noise, lighting using bylaw. Here's the challenge, is that you're going to find yourself at the front of the Ontario Normal Farm Practice Protection Board. And they're going to say, you're impacting that poor little person growing cannabis, and that you're going to have to bring your, cancel your bylaw. So you have to be very careful about the wording. And mostly if you're saying, they're allowed to be on agricultural land, I can guarantee you, because I know I'm going that direction in my case for my land. And that's the way that thing also went to Petrolia. I can guarantee you're going to find yourself at the front of that board. And there is a lot of precedent at that board to say noise, light, odors was in bylaw by different municipality, and they have to strip down their bylaw because of it is already in agricultural land. Now, the board has not made any decision yet on cannabis. The first one was supposed to be Petrolia, and that thing has been right now postponed until September. There was one case, I believe, this week about lighting. I did not have a chance to look up what was the decision. But there is no decision about normal farm practice. And that is why I think it's very important to raise the issue of what's done outside of Canada, because in Canada, Ontario, it's just a few years. That is, so that's as a whole, what I'm presenting. And like I said, I was hoping to be able to give you a document today. It is in draft form. Now you can see I'm French Canadian, so I need to ask my wife to be able to read it to be sure there is no typo mistakes and things like that. So you're going to receive that document tomorrow. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. You can stay on the line. There might be some questions, so thank you.
My pleasure.
Jean-Yves Verbin, and thank you for the others who submitted comments. So I'll now turn to council for questions or comments regarding this application. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Urban, for participating this evening, and through Alan to you. When you spoke this evening of not a food or fiber, my question then would be similarly with tobacco or grapes or Windsor, Essex, that area, those productions are not either tobacco is not food or fiber. So I guess I'm having a difficult time when hemp is a production within our municipality that has different locations that is already being produced, 27 near the Elmville Zoo, for example. I'm curious how then, if we were to create a bylaw with the 500-foot setback, in your opinion, should we be placing that on areas such as hemp or tobacco as well?
Let's speak about ham. Ham is a fiber, so this is allowed. Related to tobaccos, it is up to the municipality to give permission to be in the land or as part of the agricultural land. If you define it, it is in. Related to the 500 meters, Yeah, I forgot to speak about that part, the buffer. Odors coming out from a cannabis facility who have no odor control will have an impact up to 1.5 kilometers to 2 kilometers downwind. So I will be very inclined to say to the cannabis facility, do an odor study before you start processing. Do a proper study. Show me how you're going to control it. Give me the information about the type of scrubber you're going to install, and submit that thing and ask to do a peer review. That has been done in my case to the town I'm in. And when I did the review, because it's my field expertise, was easy to look at it. I found a lot of information missing. And when I was asking more and more questions, I found out that what they were going to propose was not going to work. And right now they have lost their case related to the Committee of Adjustment. And I have the feeling I'm going to find myself, or the town will find himself at the front of the planning tribunal. So 500 meters, you need an odor study to be able to know.
But odor study for a grow operation within a building, or an odor study for inside or outside a building?
Outside the odor study for outside, let's be honest, you don't really care of the employee working there, how they are exposed. That's ministerial labor issue. It's not environmental issue. It's not your citizen per se living around there. So it's just really odor study for at the property line you're interested in.
Yep.
I.e. having no perceived odors at the property line. At that point, you know that you're not going to have neighbors complaining. Noise, exactly the same thing, limited to a number, something like about 3 dB above the background noise level. So that way, you're not going to receive a phone call from somebody complaining. Light, limit the number of hours that they can operate to put their lights on. Because lights, the large facility, like when I was at Petrolia, I was at over 2 kilometers away from the facility at night, and I was able to take a walk in the field and see my shadow and be able to walk in the field and see very well where I was. It's just, they use a lot of lights.
Yeah. Follow on, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. And through you spoke to your jurisdiction or your municipality. So understanding that we will be receiving your verbiage, where are you located, or where can we research to find how this is applicable?
The document I'm going to submit is really specific to your site. It's not specific to my site.
But sorry, my apologies for interrupting. And just for my own curiosity, where would your site be, or what municipality are you joining us from this evening?
I am at 5900 5th line, Tottenham. So I'm a little bit south of you guys.
Oh, so Tottenham. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then
so
secondly,
I'm in the same neighborhood for the sake of it.
For sure, it's in some
and there is within the area where I am, there is a site on the 3rd line, on the 5th line, on the 11th line. I hear there is one, also a new one on the 8th line.
And then in your when I asked about tobacco or hemp, there was a suggestion that hemp was completely different than marijuana, and I have learned, or should learn, that hemp is often used to mean cannabis with a 0.3% or less THC content by dry weight. So I'm just curious, I already have hemp production or fields in Springwater Township specifically. How then would you suggest a municipality could regulate one source of that same plant, if not by others? And also, when we talk to odor mitigation or regulation, I would also like to see, growing up in a municipality that grew often vegetables, cabbage or broccoli were very offensive Also our pigs or chickens or even NASM certificates or NASM areas. So I think if we do an odor mitigation or have an odor test done in Springwater Township, it needs to be done more than specific to marijuana or to cannabis, because I think that often we need to make sure that when we're creating a regulation, it's for agricultural in general, not specific to one legal commodity. So that's the concern, Mary Ellen, that I have with that avenue.
Okay. Mr. Urban, do you have a response to that?
If you're trying to control odor from agriculture, can be garbage can be even having a chicken farm beside you or pork, I think you're going to lose. The Agriculture Act is very clear as related to nuisance from agriculture, is that what they more or less say is the farmer is allowed to do anything they want on their land, and if they impact the neighbor, too bad. And that's related to noise, odors, light, and that's seemed to be a harsh interpretation, but you have to read that regulation. It's very short. And I have put it in my document so you can read it. It's just a few paragraphs and you're going to be surprised. And that's just why there is that board, and that board will, if you try to put legislation, I'm trying to be realistic. If you try to put legislation for normal, what they call normal practice, and cannabis is not defined as normal practice yet, you're going to lose. Because somebody will drag you out front of the board, and within 6 months, you're going to have to cancel your bylaw. It's a tough field.
Let me do you have a follow-on there, Deputy Mayor, before I go to Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Marilyn. I was just gonna finally thank you, the resident again, or the interested participant again, for participating this evening, and that just out to another comment that was made that stuck out for me was the land value associated to residents, but also as a municipality with a large agricultural base, we as a council are also concerned with the agricultural value of the land. So putting a regulation with a 150 meter or 500 foot setback onto that residential, or sorry, to that residence agricultural property is of concern to me. But I think, thank you for participating this evening. And I think that we do have a large decision ahead of us, but one that, say, if we go somewhere we're going to lose, it's not even a battle that I think that I want to win. I think that this is something that we can work with our agricultural committee, our agricultural residents, and come up with something that works best for Springwater.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral? You're muted.
Yes, I pushed it. There we go. Thank you, Mayor Ellen. I want to thank Mr. Bain for coming out, and also for bringing up the fact that apparently there are these draft guidelines that have come out. I'm going to be sure and see what I can find out about them. I know from the agricultural perspective, I see it as the provincial government has seen it. We're creatures of the provincial government, and they see it as a bona fide agricultural product. So I struggle to see how we could hinder and impact many of our farmers that might want to grow this crop. But even when we talk about the bylaw itself in its present form, just doing a bit of math, if you wanted to put a 3,000 square foot facility in an industrial zone and have that 150 meters all around it, you would need approximately 6 acres of property in order to do that. So I really don't see any opportunity for employment lands or anything like that coming of this in our industrial area because of that. And I can also see the severity that it would cause for farmers as well that may have land that would become basically unusable should they want to engage in agriculturally growing marijuana plants. But I think too that there's a distinct difference between the processing of marijuana, as Mr. Urbain has alluded to, the greenhouses, the lights, that kind of thing, as opposed to cultivation in the field. But I also want to point out that in Clearview, they've had large facilities there, and that doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. It was an issue when they first wanted to put them in place, but since that time, they've been able to mitigate many of the concerns, and there's not a whole lot of light trespass there or anything anymore. So I just think if it's done properly by the people who are doing it, that as Mr. Urbain said, even with scrubbers to mitigate the odor, they might not be as bad a neighbor as we think. I would like to ask Director Spagnol. I've heard just recently that in fact there is some talk of a potential site, and I think some of the comments that came in tonight were respective of that, and it seems to be in that particular pocket down in the south end that maybe there is a move to put in an agricultural type marijuana or cannabis operation in. I'd just like to know from Director Spagnol, has anybody actually put in an application to the township for such a facility? You know, I don't know. We've asked before, and seems like there had been the odd, I guess, inquiry, but didn't seem to be anything that was concrete or moving forward. But from these comments that I'm reading tonight, it appears that it is something that's going forward.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Councillor Cabral. Staff is not aware of any formal applications of any sort to establish a cannabis production facility down in the area of where the resident comments have been submitted. So again, staff is not aware of anything formally on the go as far as that goes.
Just to follow up, I was speaking with the mayor of Clearview today on this, and they are about half a year behind us with respect to their interim control bylaw and their permanent bylaw. The facility that you refer to is a level 1 facility that is a larger production operation and subject to the regulations and checking up of Health Canada. Whereas I think more of what we're talking about here is the medicinal marijuana level 2 operations that are springing up in the municipalities. So what Mayor Measures is very interested in how we're progressing through it, because they're going through the same thing as their interim control bylaw expires late summer, and they'll have to be instituting bylaws and regulations as we are considering. Other comments? Yes, Mr. Urbain?
Related to industrial land, you don't necessarily need a buffer. The only advantage to move them to industrial is that you have they can be subject to the Environmental Protection Act. And at that point is the Ministry of the Environment is a lot better equipped than any municipality to deal with odors and management and review of documentation. And if they have proper ventilation system, a proper greenhouse seal process, I don't really care. They're going to be my neighbor, to be very honest. As long as they don't impact me. So if they're in industrial land or even on agriculture, as long as they are controlling their emission and their light and their noise, most of the people will not even care they exist.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Colgan, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Marilyn. And no, I can wait until after Mr. Urbain has left as a panelist, but it was just a comment on just unique nature of Clearview Township and the rezoning and taking agricultural land and making it industrial land. And I know specific to Creemore and Stainer and that. So each situation has its own unique problems or or whatnot, but I do, in speaking with members of the public and members of council from Clearview Township, the resident complaints or the resident interest does often vary through that. But I think here in Springwater, my biggest concern is in creating a bylaw that regulates our entire municipality and the 150 meter setback. When we're looking at federal regulation or provincial regulation, the 150, the only time that I've ever seen it in the regulation is from a school to a retail outlet. And I don't know if that's where we're pulling it from or not, but to create that between a agricultural field and a home in Springwater Township, and if we create that on the basis of odor or offensive nature, we have, for example, in Phelpston, there's a farm bordering on to O'Neill Circle, which has a NASM certificate on it. So what we're spreading there is equally offensive, in my opinion, as to what a cannabis might produce for 2 to 3 weeks a year. I don't know this, but I think that if we're going to create a law that regulates agriculture in our entire municipality, we need to consider all crops and all offensive odors and create a bylaw for everything, not just one specific odor, one specific crop. Because if I, personally, when we take this into a different lens on it, could be that, the person who owns a farm, if they're approaching someone to produce or to cultivate cannabis, whether it be hemp or whichever, I think that opportunity should be available to our residents, to our businesses, to our agricultural businesses. And this to me is a slippery slope in that I don't know what we're trying to protect or who we're trying. I feel like we're creating more red tape where it may not be necessary. So I just want to caution as we move forward that we're not creating a precedent that might not be supported. When you read through our own agricultural committee's notes, they state that they would like more time with it, that it's not precedented, that the odor versus hemp versus cannabis. So I think that there needs to be some time with this. And if we're going to continue to refer it to staff, I'm just curious what grounds this is on, because I can't find it anywhere else. So I'm looking forward to that research, I guess, but it's not something that if this was tonight and it was a decision, I wouldn't be able to support it.
Well, I think there is lots of other material out there. I was speaking with the director of Brant County, who used to be the director of planning for Norfolk County, and both Norfolk County and Brant County have substantial. They've researched this substantially, and they have odor strategies that have to happen with these operations. And if it's enclosed, an enclosed growing facility, then they have a 150 meter setback to the property. And if it's grown outside, there's a 300 meter setback. And as far as the odor mitigation, they have to, the plants that are enclosed have to come up with an odor strategy and a plan to scrub that material, that odor, and they have to basically put up security to establish the fact that it works, and they can be within the 150 meter before that security is released. And they also have lighting and other provisions within their bylaws and their site control plan. So that exists. The precedent exists down in Leamington and other places in Ontario. So I'd be glad to forward you some more detail on that. Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think what we're doing here by putting that in place, to be quite honest with you, is putting in place a two-tier system. Forget about the odor. There's lots of different odor that comes from agricultural activities. Some of them a lot worse than what marijuana or cannabis smells like. But by putting in a thing, the bylaw the way it is, what we're really doing is we're saying that if you're in a residential area, you get preferential treatment. However, if you're in a rural setting, you don't, because there's many people who do also live rurally who end up, living in that area where these agricultural activities are taking place. So it seems to me that the bylaw wouldn't apply fairly across the township anyway. And I also have to be mindful too of the Agricultural Advisory Committee and some of their comments that they make. And I do want to note that I believe there is a distinction between someone growing marijuana in an agricultural environment on an agricultural plain outside and facilitating the processing of cannabis indoors or in an industrial area. And the way the bylaw is written right now, according, if there's a structure, it's 150 meters, that's 500 feet. They need 6 acres to put the building in the middle of that field. And I think that also when it comes to the idea of where the farmer could grow it, it's not necessarily a farm per se, it's what's considered agricultural land that would permit them to grow this type of a crop. So I too, I'm still struggling with this 150 meters for a farmer necessarily growing the crop externally. There's a lot of small farms in Springwater Township, and of course they would have to apply for the requisite licensing too. And as Mr. Urbane has alluded to, there are guidelines. And now we're talking about 2 different kinds of marijuana. We're talking about level 1 facility and level 2 for medical. Is that medical processing? Because the growing of marijuana is that different if it's for recreational or medical? I mean, that's another question that would come to mind. And then I can refer back to Deputy Mayor's comment about hemp, where to obtain a certain THC content that they actually may mix certain crops together to get to that level for retail sales. So I as it is right now, I can't support moving forward with the bylaw. There's still too many things. And I know that WSP, one of the key reasons why we took them on as consultants was so that we could look at the restrictions we were looking to put in place to try and control and mitigate some of these items. And WSP as the consultant went out and provided us with a report. And I'd have to reach back out to our planning department and ask them if in the WSP consultant's report, if there was any recommendation, because we were being told that we're following the WSP report, if there was any recommendation in there where 150 meters was identified.
Director Spagnell, do you have any comment?
Yes, Mayor Allen, thank you. Through you to Councillor Cabral. The WSP report went through best practices of various municipalities across the province. One of the considerations that they recommended that could be looked at was a distance separation from cannabis production facilities. There were multiple municipalities where they implemented a similar setback at 150 meters, some were less, some were more. There were recommendations in the study which essentially said that the municipality has the ability to require site plan approval for cannabis production facilities. So the report really outlined what the options were for the municipality to consider, basically, and basically identified that if the municipality chose to do so, it might not be out of the ordinary or considered to be unreasonable to consider a setback distance for cannabis production facilities. Now, that said, there's no specific number that is backed by science to go and hang your hat on, so to speak, from council's perspective, which is what makes this a difficult discussion to have when we're talking about the implementation of a setback. So it did provide recommendations and things to take a look at. And it's through this process and through these types of discussions where staff is looking for comments from the public and also comments from council to inform any recommendations that would be forthcoming.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Mayor. During our last discussions, I was of the impression that the 150 had been taken off the table and was not in the bylaw. And I agree that I did not see that figure as a recommendation in the WSP report. I'm just through you to Mayor, to Director Spago, would it be appropriate to have something in our bylaw to the effect that when the site plan review is done by our planning department, that at that time they establish what would be reasonable given the area where the cannabis agriculture would be growing, rather than come out and say, well, a blanket requirement of 150 meters, when in some areas it may not be, maybe more of an isolated area, and that it wouldn't be necessary to have that 150. So I would suggest that it'd be more appropriate to remove that from our bylaw if it's still in there, and have something to the effect that it would be based on the area, be it rural, where you would be then at that point doing a review based on certain criteria to establish the establish the distance versus the 150 meters.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Hannah. It's perfectly within council's wheelhouse to come forward and suggest different considerations with respect to setbacks. Most definitely, there can be requirements for studies and whatnot to determine what the appropriate setback is without making it so prescriptive within the official plan or the zoning bylaw. There could be a set of criteria that are established to determine when the setback may be appropriate. So those are definitely things that staff can look at and can be implemented through a site plan process.
Does that make it more potentially challengeable to LPAT?
Mayor Allen, it depends really on if there's an appeal, what the nature of the appeal is. If the setback that's being suggested through a site plan process is based on science and it's peer reviewed, to deal with things like odor impacts and lighting, then at the end of the day, it's really going to be a consideration that would be on a site specific basis, taking a look at sensitive receptors within that specific area. So it really depends on if there's an appeal, what the nature of the appeal is. There's always arguments out there. There's always arguments and considerations as to whether or not you're better to be more prescriptive, or whether or not you're better off as a municipality to rely on experts to form what a setback may be that's appropriate, through the planning process.
Okay, Councillor Hannah, I have a follow-on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the director's response. I think it would be an appropriate, responsible, constructive idea that he's supporting, to be able to have an open book where we can make a determination based on the circumstance and the location where something is going to be developed, rather than come out with a hard and fast rule that you can't do it regardless where it is. So if we can adjust that and make that recommendation, then I would be more apt to support the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, then Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you, I guess, to Clerk Ainsworth, and I guess to Mr. Urbane as well, or Urbane, my apologies. Just having Mr. Urbane on the screen here, I'm just curious to if Mr. Urbane has been thanked and if he's still a participant, or if we're still addressing questions to him, or if our time with Mr. Urbane has been lapsed.
If you have a question of Mr. Urbane, you can direct it through me to him.
No, I don't have a question, Mr. Urbane. I'm just curious as to his participation in this portion of the meeting.
Okay, well, I'm allowing him to stay to participate. So
Okay.
do you have a question or comment?
No. So my next question then through the chair to Dr. Spagnol is the questions that we had directed to staff or as part of our correspondence package this evening speak to a facility. And I think that often when we're speaking to the setbacks, from what I'm understanding tonight and from residents that I've been speaking to, when we create this 150 meter setback, or should we, 500-foot setback, is that to the first row that's planted, or is that to a facility, bricks and mortar, that would be created? Because I think in residence, those are two very specific or two very different things. So if it's a field, or is this the potential for a bricks and mortar facility? Through you, Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. If I'm incorrect, I'll ask Planner Russell to confirm, but the definition of cannabis production facility when you're dealing with the agricultural lands takes into account the cropland or the building. So it would be from the edge of the cropland would be 150 meters, and then the building would also be factored into that. So it includes both.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just based on that, I'm a little bit more confused. Does that mean that if you have a crop and a building on a agricultural property, you're now looking at 300 meters, 1,000
No.
feet?
No,
Okay.
I think
No. The only thing I'd like to point out is, and I think this is a bit of makes it a little bit murky for me, is that I'm kind of looking at the agricultural aspect of it with respect to the farmers, yet some of the bylaw is specific to industrial zones and processing facilities and that, and we kind of are waffling back and forth, and I'm kind of, as far as industrial areas concerned, for them to put it there, and it's near residential areas, I think that's a whole different ball of wax than farmers who happen to grow marijuana or cannabis in their fields. And I do struggle a bit with that, only because I think when we're getting a response or we're asking a question, it could very easily be kind of misconstrued or misinterpreted as to what we're actually identifying. I don't have a problem with the scrubbers and all of the other stuff for a facility that's in an industrial area. And certainly the light trespass and all of that stuff. But if you've got a farm with, 75 acres and they want to grow 30 acres, then I see that as a different ball of wax. And I'd also like to point out too that I think if it's a corporation that buys into a farm, I also see that differently than the family farm that's being operated to put bread and food and clothing and pay the mortgage, as opposed to a corporation that buys a big chunk of land, such as what we have down in Clearview there, and then they build their marijuana cannabis facility there. I don't know whether or not that's cause enough to look at it and say we're going to rezone that as industrial land, because that seems to be what it's being used for. But I do find that when we're asking our questions and getting some of our responses, it's a little bit hard to differentiate between, are we talking about cannabis production facilities here, or are we talking about cannabis production facilities on agricultural property? So I just wanted to make that comment.
Well, I think the proposed draft changes to the legislation is wanting to contemplate either an industrial growing operation or an agricultural operation, is trying to make rules for either or. But Director Spagnell, can you clarify?
Yes, Mayor Allen. So yeah, the official plan really does provide definitions as to where the uses are permitted, just to provide that guidance, because it is not currently provided within our planning documents right now. In addition to that, what the official plan does, it establishes when certain applications are required when cannabis production facilities are proposed in an industrial area and an agricultural area. So for example, in an industrial area, the processing aspect of cannabis is permitted, where would be permitted as of right. And that's where you get into the scrubbers and the filters that are needed in order to deal with offsite impacts within an industrial zone. Now, where the official plan provides additional guidance for industrial properties is if for some reason somebody would like to come in and actually cultivate and utilize industrial land outdoors, then that requires a site-specific rezoning in order to consider those types of uses. The official plan, again, the draft policy that's before council then goes into further detail on the agricultural aspect of it, where essentially a cannabis production facility would be permitted as of right in the agricultural zone, provided certain parameters and criteria are met. And one of those that's being suggested through the draft zoning bylaw is the setback consideration of 150 meters. Also included in that is a requirement for site plan control to take a look at and deal with potential offsite impacts from what we'd refer to our sensitive receptors, so your residential dwellings and things of that nature. So it really does set the official plan, the draft official plan policy sets the framework for cannabis production facilities in both the industrial areas and in agricultural areas. It identifies when a zoning bylaw amendment would be required to facilitate one, and it establishes the criteria that would be looked at if, regardless of it being of the owner being a farmer or a corporation, would like to set up shop and set up such a facility.
Okay, I'll pause here and thank you, Mr. Abant, for joining us and providing your input. We'll look forward to whatever else you send us in the near future, and thank you again.
My pleasure.
Okay, other comments at this point? Now, Director Spagnell, the process from here, can you tell us that, please? Timing, process.
Yes, Mayor Allen. Planner Russell had indicated in his presentation that there is an interim control bylaw, an extension of that bylaw coming forward to council on June 2nd. The purpose of that is to extend essentially the moratorium or the pause on any new cannabis production facilities for 6 months. The expectation is that staff will be going back to the Agricultural Advisory Committee with more information as requested. And then staff will also have to review the information and the comments provided by council in order to provide a form of a recommendation moving forward. Now, that recommendation report could include revisions with respect to the draft policies for council's consideration. And the expectation from staff's perspective is to have a recommendation report back to council within that 6-month time frame.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Moore, and then we'll get to Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Director Spagnell. Mr. Urbane mentioned that Health Canada had come out with new guidelines. I just was curious to know if you have reviewed those guidelines, if they've come out since our WSP report, and if you've had to incorporate any changes, what those would be.
Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Moore. I think what staff will most likely do, because this is an ongoing consideration, and there's always new guidelines to Mr. Urbane's comments. I think what we'll do is we'll wait for Mr. Urbane's submission, and then we can provide council with information on that submission as to what is being referenced with respect to the guidelines. And in saying that, staff will do a review of any of the new guidelines that have been released and try to wade through to see which ones are applicable to what the municipality is currently considering through this process.
Thank you. Could I follow up, please?
Yes.
Could I just ask then that be sent to the Agricultural Advisory Committee so that they're made aware of those new guidelines too?
Yeah, I think that's good suggestions. There is a lot of information, and I just want to make sure that council gets it on an ongoing basis. with respect to this, and to Mr. Urbain's point and Director Spagnell's point, this was a January study of this year, and this is an ever-moving target with the increased attention and complaints that are arising from it. So is council interested in receiving information that that updates the current situation? I presume they would be. Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you, and just reviewing the Agricultural Committee comments, is there a benefit to council with this resolution to receive the information, but also to request that in here that the minimum distance separation standards from the federal government be updated or reiterated to our council for our deliberation? That was a concern of the Agricultural Committee. So I think if we can just move that forward at this time, it would give a better idea of when we do go to make these decisions, that question isn't re-asked at that time, so that we can kind of get the snowball moving now.
Okay. We could certainly review those and have them come forward. Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. Just reminding council on page 18 of the WSP report that we paid, I think, $50,000 or $60,000 to the consultant to provide. It states right there, a minimum of 150 meters setback from sensitive land uses and settlement area boundaries. Again, consistent with what the Director Spagnell has said, and in reference to my question. Again, it's not saying everywhere, just in certain areas. So I think the director understands that he could come up with some kind of policy where it was open-ended and the 150 meters would not be a rule that applied everywhere. It would be a condition based on the location where the growth may be taking place.
Okay, any other comments then? For now, okay. Thank you to all who participated in this public meeting and with respect to the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments and for showing interest in this matter. Can I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the public meeting, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Moore, that this public meeting of council held under section 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act.
Mayor Allen,
Yeah.
Jennifer, Deputy Mayor Coughlin was actually trying to speak, not seconding.
Yellow,
Okay.
not green. My
Sorry.
apologies, Marilyn. And through you, I'd just like to put forward an amendment that also that request clarification or updates from the federal government. And I'm sure Clerk Ainsworth has an update for me already.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, through you to the Deputy Mayor. Currently, we are still in the public meeting portion of the meeting, so there is no motion on the table. Once we rise and adjourn the public meeting, each application will have a motion attached to it. So once the motion to refer it back to staff is tabled, then it would be appropriate to propose an amendment.
Okay, thank you. So I would move and seconder that this public meeting of the council held under section 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act for application ZB 2021-007 regarding Adams and OP 21002 and ZB 021005 cannabis production facilities does now adjourn at 7:39 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay. Then a mover and seconder for direction following the public meeting, please. Councillor Ma and Councillor Moore, that council, having held a public meeting in accordance with section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 P13 as amended on a zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2021-007 by Bradley Adams, having noted correspondence and input be received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. All those in favor? That is carried. And a mover and seconder for the 4.2 item regarding cannabis production facilities. We'll get that on the floor. Councillor Cabral, seconder. Councillor Ma, that having held a public meeting in accordance with section 1721 and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 P13, as amended on the official plan amendment application 0P 2021-002 and zoning bylaw amendment application ZB 2021-005, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Now, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, you'd like to propose an amendment?
Yes, Mayor Allen, thank you. And through you to Director Spagno. With the correspondence received from the Agricultural Committee, there, I guess, an appetite then, if I wanted to, or if as a council, we should choose to put a ball in motion so that we receive information from the federal government regarding setbacks or regulations, so that the next time we're asked to make a decision on this, we have all the information before us. Would there be wording or a direction that you would suggest we put forward this evening?
Director Spagle?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I think as far as the information goes, I mean, the staff intends on making sure that all of the information is provided for when there's a recommendation report that's going to come forward. To that end, I mean, that would be any regulation that applies to the uses, that would be anything that comes out of any discussion from the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So we, staff would definitely make sure that they're apprised of the same information that council is, because we do intend to go back to the advisory committee with information prior to bringing this a recommendation report forward. So at this point, I mean, the way the process is mapped out, I'm really not sure that there would be any requirement for any adjustments to the resolution the way that it's worded, because we're going back to the advisory committee with all of the information that council will have as part of its deliberations in the future.
And through you, Mayor Allen, again, if I can follow up.
Yes.
And thank you. And I understand that. So what I'm to interpret from the correspondence from the committee is that they don't have information. So how do we get the information to the agricultural committee so they can make a decision to better inform us? Because
if I may, the agricultural committee, when they met, wanted to speak with someone, a resource from one of the surrounding municipalities, such as Oro-Medonte, and we're working on determining who that right person is to come forward to be able to speak to the agricultural committee. So that is being worked on now.
And I appreciate that. So would we be able then to send a letter to the Minister of Agriculture and like, we're making a significant decision that's going to, it applies to all spring water. So while the comments and correspondence that's coming in this evening is from a specific area or geographic of our municipality, I think that making a decision like this, it is one crop, I understand that, but this one crop sets a precedent for many other crops. I would like to have information from everybody that we possibly can before we make this decision. And I think that you have a astute group of individuals on our agricultural committee, but we need to get them the information they need in order to advise us. So who would we reach to? Because at this point, I'm sitting here and I don't even want to refer this to staff, because going forward with the one setback makes no sense to me. So I'm really looking for information as to how this can make sense and how this precedent can be withstanding. So who do we reach out to? Who do we ask for information? Because at this point, nothing is sensical to me.
Thoughts, Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Marilyn. Well, I think from what I gather from tonight, the first thing that council would like to see is a review done of the applicable regulations and how that all comes into play with respect to what the municipality is dealing with, understanding there's various levels of regulation. So, I mean, that's something that staff is definitely going to have to go back and review. and provide the Agricultural Advisory Committee with information on that. I mean, one of the comments that came up was to the point in the discussion point that came up through the meeting was, how does hemp factor in within all of this? So there does need to be a review of the applicable regulation as it applies to what the municipality is dealing with now. And part of the problem with going through regulations is trying to pinpoint what applies and what doesn't apply to this circumstance. And that's what staff is going to be tasked with. And at the end of the day, it's clarification on those points. And the same information that is brought forward to council will definitely need to be brought forward to the advisory committee, because they were asking similar questions that council was. So in order to be able to get the most out of our farming experts from the advisory committee, they need to have all the information available as well to be able to make an informed set of comments for council's consideration. So I think it's really looking at the regulations. Again, it's looking at best practices, and again, looking at what neighboring municipalities are doing to try to make some sense as to where Springwater would like to go and ultimately council.
Okay, Councillor Moore, then Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Director Spagnol, if I could just ask then, because I do sit on that committee with the mayor, that if we are comparing the success or failure of Oro Medonte, could we please find a township that has really done well with this project too? I think we'll hear from Oro that things haven't gone so smoothly, but I'd like to hear from a township where things have gone well.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out and speak to the Matt Vaughn, who's the director of Brant, and see whether Brant or Norfolk, to see whether he would have a planner be able to speak to, because they have really dealt with a lot of this, and and they really have a high degree of expertise down there. So I'll find out that as well. Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I guess in keeping with the comments that have been said, in particular deputy mayors and the Agricultural Advisory Committee, I noted from their correspondence that they had issues with certain areas, and also with the designated separation distances. But I'm wondering if the Agricultural Advisory Committee would not be able to provide us with some idea of if a separation distance was going to be implemented, what do they feel might be appropriate? You know, we're kind of telling them this is where we're at, and here's our draft bylaw, and they're telling us what they don't like about it. I'd like to hear from the advisory committee, not only what they don't like about it, but hey, you know what, 150 is out in left field, but we might be able to live with this. Or as Councillor Hanna said, we might go 1 and 1. So I'm just wondering if there's a way, coupled with Deputy Mayor Coughlin, to reach out to the Agricultural Advisory Committee and get their input on what we should be considering.
Yeah, that is what the exercise was in the last meeting, and is to be continued in the next meeting. So we did have that discussion, and numbers were kicked around, and the conclusion was they want to hear from more municipalities before concluding and making a recommendation. Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
My apologies, Mayor Allen, can sense that, but through you, Mayor Allen, and I guess to Councillor Ritchie, throughout this process, Councillor Ritchie's had some insight, and he's, I guess, intimate with our farming community. And I was just curious, in the last few meetings he's had insight, and I wasn't sure if there was anything new or any additional insight Councillor Ritchie would have as a valued member of our agricultural community.
Councillor Ritchie?
No, I'll just pass on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so where are we at then with the amendment? Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Wording hasn't been determined for the amendment. There's been a lot of discussion, but I haven't been able to pinpoint what exactly is being requested.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I think you had the original idea.
I did, Marilyn, and thank you, Marilyn, and through you with the advice of Director Bagnall, I don't feel the need to put forward that amendment.
Okay, thank you. So we are at the recommendation. We didn't vote on the recommendation then, obviously. So at 4.2, I've read the recommendation that the application be referred back to staff. All those in favor? Thank you. Mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw, please. Councillor Moore, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, that the bylaw 2021-063 to confirm and adopt the proceeding of council at the special meeting held on May 31, 2021, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That is carried. And a mover and seconder for adjournment, please. Councillor Cabral, Councillor Ritchie, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 7:51 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on June 2nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, council, and thank you for all the observers who might be tuning in, and stay well.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.